Good morning, my dear student. So, I think you all are doing well while studying well. So, I would like to invite you all for today's sessions on behalf of AAT Sri Lanka. So, we are in the third session of business management for AAT second stage. So, through our previous lessons, I think you would have gone through what is management and what are the aspects of management and also decision making process as well as the planning process. So today also functions of management process will be continued. To conduct our sessions, so I would like to invite our renowned lecturer, Mr. Chamara Prematilaka. So he's an associate member of Chartered Institute of Marketing UK, and also he holds a postgraduate diploma in business management in University of Colombo, and also he has obtained his MBA from University of Colombo. So, dear sir, this is over to you. Thank you.
All right, thank you for the introduction and good morning, everyone. So as we promised last week in the last session, so today we are going to discuss another part of the business management that is subject in the second stage. And now we have already done, as we introduce and as we discuss at the introduction. So we have already done first chapter and the first part of the second chapter. So today we are going to talk about the second part of the second chapter. So let me start with the slide so that you can see while I'm explaining. All right, so this is the lesson that we are going to discuss. Functions of management, chapter 2, part 1. So why this goes as part 2? Because last week we discussed the part 1, right? So now if I talk about a little bit about this chapter, so basically we are talking about the functions of management. So where we highlight planning, organizing, leading, and controlling. So those basic management functions of the management process. And we gave you a brief about those at the first part. Now we're going to talk about these functions separately in detail. So there we have already done. So now you can see the content and the chapter introduction. So functions of management. We started off with the concept of decision making. So decision making is a part of management functions. Now, in order for us to implement this planning, organizing, leading, and controlling, so we need this decision making as well. Now, apart from that, another important aspect we need to highlight here is the communication. Now, in the plan stage, we set goals and objectives. If you don't have a proper communication system, and if you don't have a proper method of communication, so we won't be able to communicate these plans and objectives to our subordinates, maybe the stakeholders. So these now decision making is also playing a key role when it comes to management, right? So managing is all about making decisions. So if you don't know how we have to make decisions effectively and efficiently, that will not be able to that will stop making this management process success. So therefore, now, as you can see in the highlight in these two topics highlighted in red, So we have already done those two parts, right? Concept of decision making and concept and principles related to planning. So now highlighted in the blue color, that is what I'm going to focus today. That is meaning and concept of organization, right? So now if I take a little bit about, talk a little bit about what we discussed in the previous two sessions, and we define what planning is or what planning was. Now, basically planning is all about defining goals, right? So in management, once we define goals, the next thing is to divide all these tasks and identifying tasks and allocating them to different employees or maybe persons is all about organizing. So that is what we are going to discuss in detail today, right? So let's go inside and see what the other learning outcomes that we actually expect you to have at the end of the session. So basically, discuss the concept of organizing and assess the basis of designing organizational structure. So what are the bases that we have to have when it comes to designing the organizational structure, and also basically the concept of organizing, and discuss the concept of authority. Now, one major important thing when it comes to organization is this authority, accountability, and responsibility. So three things derived from the organization structure. So once we organize these things, organize structure, these things comes out. And assess the ways of delegating authority among subordinates, and compare and contrast contingency factors shaping organization structure. So what factors basically impact when we are going to develop and shape organization structures, and analyze the possibility of using restructuring and re-engineering processes in business organization. Now, why we need to re-engineer and restructure is because our existing organizational structure doesn't give what we want, right? It creates many problems, and it has many problems in terms of authority, accountability, responsibility. We are not performing as we want or as stakeholders want. So then the only solution is to restructure the organizational structure, right? So that is called restructuring and re-engineering. So this is what we are going to focus in today's lessons, right? So let's start from defining what is organizing. So we have already done it, but so just let me to brief it again so that you can have an understanding at the beginning. So organizing is all about determining what tasks are to be done. Now, basically, if I remind what we highlighted in planning, so planning is all about defining goals. And once we define what we need to achieve, and then we need to identify and determine what tasks are to be done to achieve those goals as well. So that is done in the organizing stage. Right. So, and who is to do them, and how the tasks are to be grouped, who reports to whom, and where decisions are to be made. Right. So that's what we mainly do in the organizing stage. Right. Organizing means identifying and grouping different activities in the organization and bringing together the physical and financial and human resources to establish the most productive relations for the achievement of the organizational goals. So why we do all these things and all these management and all these allocation is to ultimately achieve the organization's goals, right? So now whether we achieve these organizational goals successfully will depend on your organizational structure, right? So if we can't structure our organization properly, so we will not be able to achieve these goals as we plan and expect. So therefore, so that is all about organizing, and there is another definitions as well. So you can take a look at that one as well. So that is actually, on the other words, organizing is deciding how best to group organization activities and resources so that the organization will achieve its goal, right? So we have defined the same thing in different definitions so that you can have an understanding about the concept, right? So now you know what organizing is. Now we need to see how you can do it. right? So now basically you have the understanding that these tasks to be done, and like identifying tasks to be done and who is to do them, how the tasks are to be grouped, all these things now you know, right? But how we are going to do it, that is the problem that we have next. So for that, we have a process called organizing process, where it involves several steps, and that we use to structure an organization, right? So starting off with the first, identification and division of work. Now, in order for us to achieve the goals we set at the beginning, so first we need to identify the work actually, right? And divisions of work. So identifying work means identifying jobs. So there are different jobs to be done to achieve a goal. Now let's say we want to increase sales, or we want to increase the productivity of our employees, right? So we need to increase the customer satisfaction. We need to reduce we need to increase the market share. So these things, in order for us to achieve these things, we need to identify what kind of activities we need to do. Now, let's say, for example, if we want to achieve, increase our customer satisfaction, so we need to train our employees, train our staff so that they can give best class customer service to our customers, right? And also, and if you want to increase our market share, we need to do activities in order to maybe increase the market awareness, product awareness, or maybe the branding activities. So those kind of things. So likewise, first thing in the organizing process, we need to understand and identify what are the jobs and what are the works to be done, right? So, and then we can allocate and decide who needs to be, who is going to do that. So that's the first thing that we do in the organizing process, right? So now you need to remember this one as well. So once you go through each and every steps, finally you will come up with a structure. So we are in the process of developing a structure. So once you go through all these stages, ultimately you will have a structure, proper structure in your hand for your company, right? So that is the purpose of doing this. And then actually after that, what we do is grouping of work. So this is called departmentalization. Now let's take an example and explain this. So let's say marketing, there are different works or jobs we identify. And basically we identify customer relationship management, or treating customers, and maybe increasing market awareness about the company or products, building brands and increasing market share, and doing some advertising and marketing campaigns. And also we do many activities, right? So now then we do some activities to manage employees, training, and then recruiting new staffs to the organization, and managing performance, and also finance, when it comes finance, and finding the required finance and utilizing them in assets where we can get a higher return, and utilization of assets, and then increasing profits, calculating profits, and deciding the best method to production, manufacturing. Now I told you several few set of activities that we are doing in an organization. So all these are you can't handle and manage them together when you have all these things together. So therefore what we need to do is, according to their similarities and activities, we can divide them into different groups, right? Now let's say if I look at what the activities that I discussed. Now you can take treating customers, developing market, increasing market share, branding. All these you can put into the marketing department, and managing employees, recruiting them, and performance management, training, and then grievance handling, motivating. All these things can be done via the HR department. And also when it comes to finance, and that can be done in the finance department. And also production related activities can be done in the production department. So now first stage, you identify all the jobs. In the second stage, we group them according to their similarities, right? So then once you do that, actually, we assign the duty, right? So assignment duty means officially we say that you should do this one. So manager, and you have these tasks and you have these tasks. Likewise, we allocate them to different people, right? So once departments are formed, each department is put under the charge of an individual. The work must be assigned to those who are best suited for it. So that is the assignment of duties, right? So when we are assigning duties, we have to be very careful and whether those people have those required skills. If they don't have those skills, we just can't we can't just remove them. But we need to see how we can develop those capabilities, right? That's what we do in the training. So based on that, we assign duties, right? So then okay, I'm sorry, I couldn't switch the slides. Okay, so this is the process. And so finally you can see establishing reporting relationship and who will report whom, right? So if I go back to this process, identification, now you can see here, identification and division of work, grouping of work, assignment of duties, and then finally we establish the reporting relationship. So after assigning the duties, all individual must also be assigned the authority as well. Now let's see how this works. If a person is given a task to do, and if that person doesn't have the authority to do that, so there will be many problems. Why? Because now let's say manager has a lot of activities to be or to get done from his subordinates or maybe his employees, but he doesn't have a single authority, right, to get them done. So in that case, their subordinates will not respect him and will not obey him. So why? Because he doesn't have the authority. So when we are assigning duties, we have to assign the authority as well. So authority is the legitimate power you get from the job, right? So you have some kind of ability to control your employees so that you can get what you want from your employees, right? So then once you do that, actually what happens is it creates an authority, a responsibility relationship. Now we identify tasks, group them, and assign duties, and finally, finally we do this relationship as well. So then it has authority and the responsibility both, right? So so that is the process. Now we once we go through all these steps, finally we have a proper structure, right? So that is the purpose of going through these each and every steps. Okay, so that is the process of developing an organizing structure. So now let's take a look at why this organizing is important for an organization, right? So so effective organizing process generates following benefits to the organizations. Okay, so now benefits of specialization. Now if I go back to this previous stage, now we identify different tasks and we allocate them to different persons. So one person is doing this one person is doing this. What happens when we allocate them those works to each and every person is, so they get specialization, right? So now if I take an example, simple example, so one person who is handling accounting functions in an organization, he knows how it works and he knows what's happening in that department or functions. So that is kind of specialization. And also clarity in working relationships. Now what we mean by clarity in working relationships means, so if you don't know actually to whom I should report and what are my tasks, what should I do, so then people actually just stay in an organization without doing anything. Why? Because he doesn't know what needs to be done and what to do and to whom he should report and anything like that. So it creates many problems within the organization. So but if we have a proper structure, and that will tell you what should be done and what should not be done. So it creates a clarity in working relationship. And also this working relationship means, now I can tell you one example, like relationship, when it comes to working relationship in an organization. Now, if an employee doesn't know to whom he should go and report when he comes up with like faces or come across problem or dispute or an issue in work-related environment, so it will create many problems. Why? For one thing, he won't be able to solve that problem. That is one thing. And then that will, like, he will go and tell this problem to many persons, which is not suitable sometimes. And ultimately, it will create a maybe negative atmosphere within the organization. So ultimately, it will create many problems. So when you have a proper structure, proper relationship, if I have a problem, I can go and talk to my immediate boss, right? Then if he can't solve that problem, he will take it to his boss. And then likewise, it will go step by step according to a proper hierarchy. Now, what if all the employees go and talk to CEO regarding their problems? So then that that person will not be able to do anything other than solving the employees' problems, right? So if those kind of situation is there in an organization, so it will not be, clarity will not be there in the organization in terms of working relationships. So this organizing structure gives you some insight about all these relationships, right? Working relationship. And also optimum utilization of resources. Like when we have proper structure, we can utilize resources. Now, when we, if I go back to this now, when we are dividing and grouping these, I mean, when we're identifying and dividing, assign them according to their skills and talents and capabilities, right? So when we do that, what happens is basically you can, so you get the maximum benefit, and you basically, like there will not be any wastage of resources. Why? Because that person knows how to use those resources very well, right? So why that's what we mean by that. And also adaptation to change. So when it comes to adaptations and when it comes to managing change, so if we can now let's say when we are introducing a change to an organization, so now we have a hierarchy in an organization, and then we have a proper structure. So if you want to implement a change within an organization, first CEO comes and talk to his general managers or people or employees or designations who are very close to him, and then those people pass it to middle-level managers, and then middle-level pass it to the lower level. So likewise, it goes as a flow, right? So it's then like, now what if some employees get to know some changes and they spread some rumors within the organization, and ultimately it creates many problems without even knowing what exactly is going to happen, without even knowing the positive sides of the change, right? So there is a subject called change management, and you will be discussing all these things in detail. So when we are implementing a change, if we have a proper structure within the organization, we will be able to do that effectively and efficiently, right? So an effective administration. So that is also very simple. Now you can manage them and administrate them easily, right? So we have departments, we have levels, structures. It's easy for us to administrate them. And development of personnel. So that is something related to the benefits of specialization. So now when we have one particular job to be done, and you get an overall knowledge about that task, right? You get some kind of specialization. And so when you have a proper structure, you know the next step that you have to get into in your career ladder, right? So you have a clear idea. You can see what's happening in the organization. So this is the next step, and I have to work for that. So you get clear understanding about these things, right? So what happens is, now if there is no proper structure, if there is no, like, you don't know what's going to happen next, what is my next achievement, what is my next uh, development, right? If you don't have any idea about that, you will not be developing, right? So that's structure, proper structure will develop you personally as well. I mean, like personal development as well. So why we do that, why we say that is because now you can clearly say, I was working in this department under this position and likewise, right? So it will help you to get a new job in somewhere else as well. Why? Because your work was clearly defined. Okay, so expansion and growth. So when you have a proper structure and when you do things properly and when you allocate things properly and when you manage things properly, it will result in expanding your business or growing your business. Why? Because you're internally, you have a proper structure where orders and commands are moved effectively. So that will help you to expand the business, grow your business and get into new markets, right? So maybe locally or internationally, right? So that is the importance. Or if I get a question why we need to have a proper structure or organizing structure in the organization, you can say these benefits, right? So yeah, these importances. So now you know, now we are going to define what is organization structure. So you already know it, but this is what we come up with after going through this organization process, right? So organizing a structure is the outcome of organizing process. Yes. So once you go through with this organization process, uh, you come to this point, right? Organizing structure, that is the outcome. So whenever an organization grows in size and complexity, an adequate structure is needed. Yes, exactly. So structure clearly defines the job positions, authority, and responsibilities of different employees, right? So an organizational structure is defined as network of jobs positions, right? Different job positions, responsibilities, and authority at different level. So, and therefore, it is a framework that manages devise for dividing and coordinating the activities of members of an organization. And finally, Peter Drucker clearly says an organizational structure is an indispensable, that is, it is necessary and essential means, and the wrong structure will seriously impair business performance and even destroy it, right? So if you have a proper structure, it will give you definitely good results. And if you have a bad structure, definitely it will destroy your entire business, right? So we have to be very careful with the structures. There are some examples because of the structural problems. Many companies collapse and fail in the operation. So, okay. Now, now you know what organization structures are. So basically, there are two types that we can understand and identify in management and business organizations. So that is functional and divisional. Okay, so functional. Functional means now you can see, you know what functions are now, right? Function means we have different functions in an organizations. Let's say marketing, production, and then managing human resource, managing finance, different functions in an organization. So according to them and based on these different functions, if we develop a structure, that is called functional structure. So when the activities or jobs are grouped, keeping in mind the functions to be performed, then it's called functional structures. Okay, these functions are organized into separate departments in a manufacturing concern. So division of work into key functions will include production, purchase, and marketing, and personnel, right? So if you take a look at, these are the functions, and so the board of directors comes at the top, and managing director, and then under him, So you can see different functions, right? So this is a functional structure. So now let's take a look at the advantage and the disadvantage. So specialization, yes. So you have different functions, you get specialization, you work in the marketing department and you get some specialization in marketing. And easy supervision, yes, when you have these separate functions, you can, like, marketing people can take care of marketing department and HR people can take care of the HR department. So it will easy supervision and easy coordination as well. So they can coordinate within the department itself. Okay, what are the disadvantage? Yeah, this is a very important thing. The departments become specialized in their own way and fail to see the prospect of the whole organization. Thus, it becomes difficult to achieve organizational goal. Some of the one common like problem that we have seen. So sometimes finance is not supportive for marketing, right? So now I'll take one example. So a company, sometimes they need all these like cost structures and maybe like cost breakdown, maybe quotations, and that needs to be done by the finance department. So, but in the marketing department needs to get these things quickly in order to like give a better service to the customers, right? Sometimes when now marketing department always they deals with the customers and they know how important it is. Since maybe some other department is not directly involved in the customer's requirement, so they don't see the, I mean, they sometimes they can't understand this importance. So like there are, I mean, not always happening, but there are some instances where we can experience. So they don't see the importance of that, and they actually don't involve that much, right? So what happens is then it creates some clashes in between these departments. That's a disadvantage of these functional structures. And also sometimes when you work, like when you have different departments, you focus only that department activities. Now we say we are marketing and we don't need to worry about anything else, and we say we are finance, no, that's none of our business, and likewise. So we we forget what the organization main objective and work for our department objectives, right? So that will help sometimes to get the organizational objectives. But sometimes, most of the time, we face that problem as well, right? So, and the department head start thinking their department to be functional empires. This leads to conflicts among various departments. So what happens is they work on their own department to be functional empires. And now we say we are marketing and we want to be the now. Likewise, they have forgetting about what we call entire organization's goal, and they focus on their department goal, something like that. So this leads to conflict among various departments. And when the departments are large, it becomes difficult to coordinate as well, right? So sometimes department itself becomes a large one, and then it's difficult to coordinate sometimes as well. So now let's see what kind of organizations actually, where this suits best, right? So organizational functional structure is suitable where the size of the business unit is large, right? Specialization when the specialization is required, and decentralization of authority is needed, right? So centralization means like taking all the decisions by one person, and decentralization means you spread and divide that power and authority among different parties. That is decentralization. So if you want, and if it is required, that sort of controlling method, so then this functional structure is more suitable, and only one product is sold, right? So if we have 2 or 3 products, so we have to have separate department. It's difficult. Now let's say one product, we have all these functional structure, and then likewise it will create. So another thing, divisional structures. So simply, okay, let's go back to that. So divisional structure is you create and you design an organizational structure based on the divisions we have and based on the divisions the organization has. So now let's say, now if I take an example, Unilever, actually they have different sections. Now they are into food and then home care, and then skin care, body care, so different sections, right? So, and they're into beverages as well, so different sections. So likewise, you can, some companies, now if you look at companies like Hemas and Unilever and all these FMCG companies, and they are into many sections, divisions. So based on that, if we divide an organization structure and developers organization structure, so that's called divisional structure. Now you can see divisions: cosmetics, medicines, garments, and footwear, right? So these are the different divisions that organizations has. And under those different divisions, we have production, purchase, marketing, and all these functional functions separately, right? So that is that. And now you're going to take a look at the advantage and disadvantage. Development of personals, right? So yes, personal improvement, accountability, the performance of each department can be easily assessed. Yeah. So now when we have all these things together, it's difficult to find if a mistake is happen, or if a default is there, or any problem we face. It's difficult for us to monitor that. Why? Because it all comes as together, right? So but if we have these different divisions, it's easy for us to find who is accountable for this, who is the responsible party for this, right? So it's easy in that way. And the fast decision making, it's easy for us to make decisions. Why? Because now if we want to like communicate something and want them to make decisions, now you can just ask all these divisional heads and come up with a plan or something like that, right? So independently, and so decisions are much faster. This also promotes flexibility and an initiative. Okay, so now let's take a look at the disadvantage. There may be a conflict among different divisions on allocation of resources. Yeah, someone comes and say that, so cosmetics are getting more like allocations, maybe from budgets and different, like maybe in terms of say financial allocations and all these things. And another disadvantage, each department requires all the resources to work as an independent unit. This increases cost as there may be duplication of activities across. Now everyone, now if you look at this, now you can see here each and every division, there are separate departments of production, marketing, human resource, and finance. So what happens is when we have all these under these different divisions, it will like require all the resources, right? So they have separate. Now we need to allocate separately all these resources for all these divisions separately, right? So it will sometimes creates more, additions to the cost. The divisional heads focus only on their product. They may fail to identify themselves as part of the organization and develop divisional conflicts, ignoring all. Yeah, so we discussed the same thing. So they forget about the organizational goals sometimes and work only for the divisional goals. Is suitable where the number of product is more than one. Yes. And different manufacturing technologies and marketing methods are used. Yes. Sometimes like if you have to use some different marketing methods, in that case we can't have one single marketing department. Why? Because they are different. So if they have that sort of department, but they have to treat them differently, each division separately, right? So the size of the concern is very large or growing. So in that case, you can. So finally, we have the matrix organization structure. So in this case, you can see here, so one chief executive is there. Under chief executives, we have vice presidents of engineering, production, purchasing, and administration for different departments. And then we have different projects. Now we have project A, project B, project C. Likewise, you can go as many as you can. And also you can see the different staffs that are coming under these projects separately. And also they have separate heads, which is reporting directly to the CEO of the company. So now let's see how what are the disadvantages. I can see here better coordination and control, adaptability to dynamic environment, effective utilization of resources, sufficient time for top management with delegation of authority to project managers, excellent in interdisciplinary specialization, development teamwork. And disadvantage, violation of unity of command, costly structure, problem of over specialization, and difficult to balance, feeling of insecurity, lack of coordination among separate functions. Okay, so these are the disadvantages. Now we're going to talk about another aspect in the same part, which is very important: authority, responsibility, and power. Okay, so when it comes to authority and responsibility, okay, now we told you in the development of the organization structure, we need to delegate the task and we need to allocate the task among different employees. So once you delegate and those tasks, as I told you, we need to give the authority as well. So authority means power to take decisions. It also refers to the right of an individual to command his subordinates within the scope of his position, right? So now authority means now there should be some limitations for the authority within the scope of his position. So we face many problems when people go beyond their scope of their position to use the authority and give orders and commands, then it creates many problems. So first, when we are giving commands to others, we need to understand the scope of our position. So within that scope of our position, within that scope of our designation, we should give the authority, right? Use that power, right? Influence others using power or the authority. So when the managers, now simply authority means power to take decisions. That's the power, right? That's the authority. But you can't go beyond your scope of that power. That's what we need to understand. When the managers are passing their responsibilities to the subordinate, they also pass some authority matching the responsibility. Okay, so however, they should not pass all their authority to their subordinates. Now, like when they pass their authority to their subordinates, and they should not like passing all the authorities to their subordinates. In context of business organization, authority can be defined as the power and right of a person to use and allocate the resources efficiently to take decisions and to give orders as to achieve the organizational objectives. Okay, so that is that, and that is the authority. So yeah, and then continue to the next slide. Continue the same thing. It means the obligation of the subordinates to properly perform the work assigned to him. Okay, now this should be the responsibility actually. Yeah, so this topic, this slide topic should be responsibility. So it means the obligation of the subordinate. Now let's say if I was asked to do something and I'm responsible for that. Now my manager or my boss giving a certain task to be done or to to get from me, or to get that done from me. And then he, in that case, he uses his authority, right? So once he gives his authority, and I'm responsible for the what we call for that authority, right? So that is called my side, it is responsibility. So once he gives some command using his authority, and I'm responsible to do that, that is my obligations. Actually, I'm obliged to do that. So the process of delegations begins when the manager passes on some of his responsibilities to his subordinates, which mean that responsibility can be delegated. Okay. So however, when an employee is given the responsibility of some job, he must also be given the requisite authority to carry out his job. It is the duty of the person to complete the task assigned to him. A person who is given the responsibility should ensure that he accomplishes the task assigned to him, right? So once a person gets the responsibility, he should make sure that he should be finishing that work as advised, right? Okay. So now we're going to take a look at the difference between authority and responsibility. Okay. So now authority means, all right, so authority means, now we're going to take a look at the difference. All right, so authority and the responsibility. So there is a question in the Q&A, so and asking whether this is second stage or not. So this is second stage. So second stage, a second chapter, and the part 2 of that. Okay, so differences between authority and responsibility. Authority, actually, it is the legal right of a person or a superior to command his subordinates. Now, sometimes, actually, we get, not sometimes, like when we work in an organization and we get legal right of a person or a superior to command his subordinates. That is the authority. Now, and also authority is attached to the position of a superior in concern, and that authority is like aligned with the person who engaged in that particular job. Authority can be delegated by a superior to a subordinate. Yes. So sometimes, like, we give some work to do particular person, subordinate, and we need to give some authority as well. Otherwise, delegating task without delegating the proper or required authority, like, will not happen, and it will face many problems. So therefore, when we are locating or what we call delegating authority task, we need to give the authority as well, right? So and also it flows from top to bottom. So why authority? Actually, now CEO, the top of the management, top level, decide and comes up with certain strategies, and then they passes it to the middle level, and then what happens is usually they pass it to the middle level, and whereas you see the lower level, and so sometimes, like, you pass it to different stages from different like levels. Okay, so now when they make decisions from the top level, so then they translate to, likewise they do it. And so what happens here is, now usually the authority flows from top to bottom. Okay, and that's what happens. So then let's take a look at the responsibility. And responsibility, it is the obligation of subordinate to perform the work assigned to him. And now usually what happens is responsibility means, as we discussed and as I told you, it is the obligation of subordinate to perform the work assigned to him. Okay, so now I have some responsibility to finish and to do when some tasks are allocated. And then responsibility arises out of superior subordinate relationship in which subordinate agrees to carry out a duty given to him. A responsibility cannot be shifted and is absolute. So now why we say that is because usually responsibility cannot be transferred or switched or shifted because when I was given a certain responsibility and I actually have to do it, right? So I can't transfer it to somebody else. Responsibility cannot be shifted. It flows from bottom to top. Why we say that it flows from bottom to top is because now my boss is giving some work or task, and then I'm responsible for that. So I'm responsible for that means like I'm reporting to or create that responsibility with the next level, so with the top level. So that's why we say it goes from actually it flows from top to, or rather bottom to top, right? Yes, bottom to top here. So and then we talk about accountability. Now what we mean by accountability is, so now when this responsibility is passed to somebody else or maybe subordinate or colleagues, and what happens is we have to accountable for that. Accountable for means there is a difference between responsibility and accountability. Responsibility is the obligation to act. Accountability is the obligation to answer for an action. Now, what happens is now when you are obliged, you have to do that act, right? So when you are accountable, you have to give an answer. You have to justify what happens. Even if someone gives you a certain amount of money, and you need to say and you need to highlight and explain what happened to those money, right? So that's something like that. So therefore, accountability consists of giving explanations for any variance in the actual performance from the expectation set. Accountability cannot be delegated, right? So accountability, you have to answer, you have to give explanations, right? So not just finishing the task, but you need to give like explanations as well. So you are like liable explaining those things. Okay, so and then we'll talk about the power. So power is broader concept than authority. So it can be defined as the ability of person to influence others. So therefore, authority becomes one source of the power. Okay, authority becomes one source of the power. So it is part of the power. Okay, so even though managers can get the authority and responsibility from their positions, they have to develop power based on other sources, right? So power can be like developed on different bases. Now, one is actually the legitimate power. So this comes from the belief that a person has the formal right to make demands and to expect compliance and obedience from others. So that is what we call legitimate power. And that comes from the position itself. And then reward is the result from one person's ability to compensate another for compliance. Now, say some people actually have the person's ability, different abilities, and based on that you get a reward, and based on that you have some power and expertise. So superior skills generate some power, and also referent mean this is the result of person's perceived attractiveness and worthiness and right to respect from others. So referent power, persons perceive attractiveness. Because of the personal attractiveness, there is a power. And coercive means the ability to punish someone when the person is not compliance with the rules and regulations. So power can be generated, or power can be attained by these different sources, right? So okay, now so now we are going to talk about how to delegate the authority. Okay, so when we are allocating and dedicating authority, so delegation is defined as a process of entrusting responsibility and authority to the subordinates and creating accountability on those who are entrusted within the authority and responsibility, right? So now simply it is the process of passing the responsibility or passing the authority to subordinates and delegates, right? So that is called delegation. So passing it to somebody else. So delegation means downward transfer of authority from a superior to subordinate. That is what I just explained. It is required for efficient functioning of the organization as well as enable the manager to use his time on high priority work. It helps the subordinates to satisfy his needs. A manager alone cannot perform all the tasks assigned to him. In order to meet the targets, the manager should delegate authority. So delegation of authority means division of authority and powers downwards to the subordinates. Yeah, so then we'll take a look at why we need to delegate this authority, the objective of doing that. So now why I need to do this is because we can reduce by doing this the excessive burden on superiors. Now if the managers themselves keep all these authorities and responsibilities, and it's difficult for them to function these things. Therefore they can pass some amount of some of these responsibilities and authorities to the subordinates. Okay, and also now when managers alone do all these tasks and that will not give to somebody else, when they will not give those authorities to somebody else, and those people will not grow, right? So if they also want to get an opportunity and grow themselves, they should be given some responsibilities and authorities. So therefore they have to work on these aspects as well. To create a team of experienced and matured managers for the organization, it acts as a technique of management and human resource development. Yeah, so if we want to well-equipped, or we can say well-qualified, skillful employees, or set of employees, set of teams, and we need to give the authority as well. So to improve individual as well as overall efficiency of the organization, so we need to work on this delegation of authority, right? So therefore, based on these reasons, or because of these reasons, we delegate the authority, or else you can say these are the objective of delegating authority. Okay, so now process of delegating authority. So this is how we delegate the authority. I mean, or in other words, this is how we pass the authority in an organization. Now you can say first, assignment of duties to subordinates. So first we assign the duties. Now you should do this one, that one, likewise. And then as I told you, you can't just do or get things done by just assigning duties. You need to give the authority as well. So then you transfer the authority. And if that subordinate doesn't accept that assignment, so then you can see here, so you have to go back and assign it to somebody else, and means reject it, right? If that person doesn't like to accept it, means he's rejecting. So if he's rejecting, you can't force him and ask him to do it. No, so then you have to assign to somebody else. So then you have to again go back to the first stage in the process where we assign duties to subordinates, right? So, and then if now let's say we assume that the person accepts the assignment, then once he accepts, the moment he accepts the assignment, it creates a relationship between the authority and responsibility, right? So now when I say okay, so the moment when I say okay, now it creates a relationship between the authority, and I am responsible for that, right? So that is how the delegation of authority happens, right? So now let's take a look at after that, now this part, the third steps, when someone rejects this, And we can see why these people are rejecting, right? So there are various reasons. So let's take a look at why these or obstacles and barriers, or why can't we sometimes delegate authority, right? This can be discussed in two parts or two ways. One is on the part of manager or superior, and on the other side you can talk about on the side of subordinates, right? So sometimes managers don't like to delegate the authority, or means share their authority with their colleagues, subordinates, and sometimes subordinate itself, actually they don't like to get the authority. So now let's start off with this managers part and superiors. So why they don't delegate authority is because unwillingness of the manager to delegate authority. Like sometimes managers don't like to delegate the authority. Why? Because now so they want to keep themselves, and they don't like to share their authorities, things like that. And fear of competition, yes. So they know, sometimes they think that now if we share these things and that person will get to know all these things and I will be losing my position and all these things, and it will be a competitor, right? So these are common things that we face. So lack of confidence in subordinate. Sometimes manager actually doesn't have the confidence about their subordinates. Now if I give this task to this person, I'm not sure whether he will do it or not, because I don't have the required confidence. Okay. So lack of ability to direct. Sometimes managers actually, they can get things done from themselves, but they can't delegate it to somebody else and get that done. So why? Because they don't have that ability to direct others. Okay. Absence of controls that warn of coming troubles. Absence of controls that warns of coming troubles. So now they think that many problems will arise because of this thing, and because of that reason they don't delegate authority, decide to dominate subordinate. Yeah, obviously sometimes when we want to dominate others, and we just need to yeah, sometimes something like that. Actually, when we want to dominate them, we don't transfer the authority. Okay, sometimes we have some problems at the subordinates points of views as well. So why they don't take some responsibilities and authority, or rather authorities. Too much depends on the manager for decisions. Sometimes we have seen, so usually we have to go and ask from our manager for each and every matters, right? So we are overly depend on our manager, and we don't have the freedom to make our, not make our own decisions, but at least to a certain extent we have the freedom to make decisions, at least to a certain extent, right? When employees have that freedom, so it will help them to grow themselves. Otherwise they always have to depend on and spoon-feeded by their managers or supervisors. And fear of criticism. Sometimes employees, actually some subordinates, and they don't they think that they will be criticized. Now if I get this authority and do it, many people will say many things to me, and they will talk about me behind me, right? So, and then they will criticize me, they will talk about negatives, they will talk about bads, and so much of negative things, right? So that is the fear of criticism. And lack of information. Sometimes when someone, or maybe my boss, is going to deliver or delegate some authority, I go and say no. Why? Because I don't have the required information. So without having the required information, so I say no. So now there are maybe a lot of positives. Okay, right. So, and absence of lack of information. So now let's say my manager is going to delegating some task, and there are a lot of positive sides for me, and there are a lot of things that I can improve, and there are a lot of things that I can grow myself. So that's a new experience. That's how we grow ourselves. When we experience new things, actually we grow ourselves, we face those challenges. So now we don't know about these positive sides without searching further information. So by now we just say that no. So that is lack of information. So therefore, some subordinates don't like to get the authority because of lack of information. Okay, so now that's why we say we need, when we make decisions, and we talk about in the decision making part as well, now we need to question from ourselves whether we find required information when we make decisions. Are we taking required information or adequate information to make decisions? Or are we relying on, like, have we searched all the information before we make a decision? Right? So we need to ask that question from ourselves when we make certain decisions. So if we come to conclusions, like only looking at one side of that, and then we will be ended up with negative conclusions or wrong conclusions. Okay, so absence of positive incentives, yeah, obviously now sometimes we don't have these positive vibes or like positive atmosphere, anything like that, right? So we don't have any incentives, positive incentives. Absence of self-confidence, we don't have, like, sometimes the subordinate itself, they don't have the confidence, self-confidence, they can't trust themselves. And the difficulty in decision making, yes, we, like, sometimes we will make, they think that we will take, or maybe we think that we will make a wrong decision, we will end up with wrong decisions, but because of that we don't like to get these authorities. And poor superior subordinate relations, sometimes, like, boss and the subordinate, they don't have very good relationship. So when that relationship is not there, so they work just for the work, and they are not work purposely and with their own interest, and just for the sake of doing a job, or just for the sake of finishing a task, right? So just for the sake of completing work, they work in that way. So when that kind of relationship is there, so it's difficult to accept and delegate authority, right? So that happens. Okay, so right, so and also okay, so that is the barriers. Actually, I took that point from this process. Now if I go back and talk a little bit about these things, now we are talking about passing the authority, right? So when we are passing authority to subordinates, that's called delegation of authority. And when you're delegating, there is a process where we have to do it, or the process we do it. And in that process, sometimes, when we are going step by step downwards, at a certain point, we face problems, acceptance assignments, and even this problem can happen of assignment of duties to subordinate as well. Now, assignment of duties to subordinate, actually, manager doesn't give the authority. So that is this part, barriers from the manager side, right? And when the acceptance of assignment doesn't happen, that means rejecting the authority, that is actually this part on the subordinate side of it, on the subordinate side. Okay, so I think you are clear with that. And then contingency factors affecting organizational design. Yes. Now when we are designing an organizational structures, some factors affect, right? So all organizations have some form of structure to facilitate the implementing of strategy to achieve set objectives. The contingency factors to be studied are briefly discussed in the following section. Managers are responsible for analyzing and understanding the contingency factors that affect the organization's design, and then design a structure to fit these contingency factors. Though so many contingency factors are affected in our design, several factors are more important. Yeah. So now what we mean by here is the fact that when we are developing or when we are designing organization, so designing organization is all about designing this relationship, authority, and responsibility and accountability. Now, when we are doing that, certain factors affect and size of the organization. Now, obviously, whether we go for a functional, divisional, or matrix, it will that will be determined of the size of the organization and age of the organization. Sometimes, like some organization, actually they are very old and it goes as a family business model, and then delegating authority, and there are some restrictions, and they say that that the authority should be delegated only to these close relations or something like that. And then actually those are not I mean outdated, but quite outdated, but it's not discussing in this modern business practices. But anyway, so those factors are affecting sometimes, and also the environment and strategy and technology, right? So these factors affect when we are designing an organization structure. Okay, so those are called contingency factors. And also, so finally, we came to this one, organizational restructuring. So now once we do that, or once we structure, or once we design organizational structure, finally, now let's take a look at this, what this slide explains. Organization restructuring is the process of redesigning one or more aspects of a company. The process of reorganizing a company may be implemented due to a number of different factors, such as positioning the company to be more competitive, survive a currently adverse economic climate, or promise the corporation to move in an entirely new direction. So restructuring a corporate entity is often a necessity when the company has grown to the point that the organizational original structure exactly can no longer efficiently manage the output and general interest of the company. Yes, exactly. So when the stakeholders no more accept the structure which is existing in the company, so we have to restructure it, re-engineer it. So maybe sometimes when we are scaling up our organization or growing our business, we need to make certain amendments to the structure of certain parts of our business. Why? Because they are not giving what we expect, or maybe our customers expect, or maybe our environment expect. So therefore, we need to do certain changes into the structure. So that's called restructuring, right? So now you can understand when you look at these slides as well. So why, now if I tell you why we do, as I explained, it may be survive in a currently adverse economic climate. So sometimes like downsizing employees, so removing employees, or maybe like they are restructuring the layers. So these kind of things are happening, right? An entirely new direction, and also maybe like they want to go to an entirely new direction, entirely new market, or maybe global market. So when they're going, and their countries and those environments are quite different, and so when we face those differences, and they have to adapt and align those differences, and what happens is they have to make changes to their organizational structure as well, in order to adapt to these changes and overcome those barriers. All right, so that is the end of today's session. So before we wind this up, and I'm gonna give you a brief about what we discussed so far. So let me go back to the first slide. Yeah, so we discussed the concept of organizing and assess the basis of designing an organization structure. So why we need to have an organization structure, what are the ways we can develop it and design it. And also we talk about the concept of authority, accountability, and responsibility, and assess the ways of delegating authority among the subordinate. Yes. The process of delegating authority we discuss in detail, and then we talk about the problems we face when we are going to delegate the authority, and compare and contrast contingency factors shaping organized structure. So what factors affect or impact when we design an organized structure, analyze the possibility of using restructuring and reengineering processing business organizations. So why do we need to like restructure and re-engineer an organization. So I told you several reasons, maybe because to adapt to the environment changes, or maybe like to go to a new direction or something like that. So that is the end of today's sessions. So I will hand over again to the AAT Sri Lanka, to the host of this program. And so hopefully we are planning to meet you in another session. So until then, so we'll stop here from today's session. So I'm going to hand this over to the AAT Sri Lanka.
Thank you very much for your insightful lesson, sir. I think our students would have gained thorough knowledge about that particular area of management. So, my dear students, so this is our effort. All our effort is to create you competent and also enhance your productivity while being new normal. So, thank you very much for your participation. Also, there will be another session tomorrow. So, please stay tuned with us. Until then, goodbye.